I think there's something profoundly different about coming and seeing a piece of art in person than there is about Googling it. Googling it will do in a pinch, don't get me wrong, but it's really lovely to be able to come and see it with your own two eyes.
You walk into the gallery, the first thing that you've got here on the right is some information on Arthur Mooney. Sort of an overview of his life, how he came to Charles City in the 1980s, was orphaned, ended up working with people in town. It walks through his life pretty well for the most part.
Arthur Mooney was someone who lived in Charles City. He came here as a child in the 1860s and was very soon orphaned as soon as he came to Charles City. He had a sister too, and so they were both kind of taken in by community members. And eventually he became an apprentice to a guy named J.E. Rich, who was a photographer. And so Arthur Mooney was one of Charles City's first photographers. The gallery kind of came from his later years. So after he moved out of Charles City, he did kind of a lot of jumping around from other photography studios in other parts of Iowa and Minnesota, and then eventually he ended up in Chicago. And when he went to Chicago, he ended up working for Eastman Kodak. And so when he worked for Eastman Kodak, he was first called like a demonstrator. So I think he probably was kind of showing people how to use cameras and that kind of thing, and kind of a salesperson in that way. And he basically worked his way up through Eastman Kodak, eventually landing in New York City, working there for Eastman Kodak, and became basically an executive of the company, and so garnered wealth that way. And he never married, didn't have any children, so his wealth went to purchasing art books and art, which he later donated to Charles City, the town that he kind of thought of as the place where he was from and where people really cared about him as an orphan in town. So it was kind of a thank you to everybody who knew him and who took care of him as a child in Charles City to give them this art.
The earliest print that we have in the collection dates all the way back to 1492. That is not like a reprint of any kind. This is the actual paper that you found it printed on in the year 1492. That is, I believe, Michael Wolgemuth was the name. He is the earliest print here.
He was German, and you can tell, if you know anything about art, we haven't quite hit true Renaissance techniques yet. Most of the print looks pretty flat. There's not really a lot of depth and spatial awareness happening, I guess is what you would call it, in this particular print. But that's the earliest thing that he collected.
Some of our later prints extend into the 1970s, so it's an incredibly wide chunk of art history that you can see different snippets of here and there.
Even if you don't really know who he was, or if you're not super familiar with what he did, it's at least kind of a picture of his interest in art, because he wasn't even he wasn't a painter, but he was friends with painters when he lived in Charles City, and then he was a photographer, so he was kind of always in the art world, and so this is kind of like a little snapshot of his interests, I guess, which is kind of neat.
It looks like Arthur Mooney probably had some favorites, or perhaps it was just what he was able to find at the time. But especially, we're talking like late 19th century art. He's got a lot of James McNeill Whistler, for example. And then up until his death, it seems like he was interested in Grant Wood. We even have a Grant Wood print that is inscribed to Arthur Mooney from, I believe the year was 1937. So we've got quite a variety. If you're interested in it, there's a chance we might have something related to it here in the gallery.